How is everybody doing tonight?
We are fine. We are fine. How are you today?
Awesome. Just awesome.
Cool. And for those of you who don't know, this is the Bunny Rabbit's Hole. This is a podcast where we take a central theme and then we explore the theme for a little bit and we see where the topics take us and we go down different holes. And then when we finally get to a point where we've either exhausted that hole or we're just too far off topic, we get pulled back to the original theme and then we continue on. That's kind of what we do here at the Bunny Rabbit's Hole.
Yep. And there's a little disclaimer. We do research our topics and everything is based off fact, but we also insert our own opinions. And if you're easily offended, just turn this off right now because we don't want you to fucking listen to it.
Exactly. This is, for all intents and purposes, a comedy podcast. We don't take the events or some victims or any of these situations lighthearted, but we have fun with it. And we hope to. We're just here to entertain. If it's not your cup of tea, bye-bye. We'll just get that out of the way. So tonight, the hole is being opened. What are we doing tonight, Craig?
Tonight we are talking about prison breaks.
Awesome. And I'm guessing that we're probably not going to talk about that piece of shit Fox show that was on where the two brothers get in prison. The one goes to prison, the other's got to go to prison to break the brother out, and then they end up in the next season in another prison, and the whole shit keeps regurgitating. We're not talking about that shit, right?
No, not at all. I've never even watched that show.
No. But I will say, though, Stallone's escape plan, the first one with Schwarzenegger, not too bad.
I think I saw part of it, but...
For two 70-year-old men trying to escape from a prison.
Two buff 70-year-old men.
That's true.
Oh.
They both beat my ass.
Right, same here. So I guess we should start out, and we can kind of go chronological, and we'll talk about the most famous. Obviously, the Alcatraz is going to be right up there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd like to start way back in the 13th century. Now, back then, there was a gentleman named, and I'm going to slaughter this name.
I was just about to say good luck.
Yeah, but it's Gruffydd ap Llewellyn Fawr. So
that sounds like a goth chick's really bad character from like World of Warcraft or something.
Right. So this was the year 1244, and this gentleman, because I'm not going to bother trying the name again, was in prison in the tower.
Gruff.
Yeah, Gruff. McGruff's crime dog. So he was imprisoned in the Tower of London.
And that's DWG, though, dog. Yeah. Crime dog.
Yeah, let's take a bite out of crime or commit some. So I do not know what this gentleman was in prison for, but he was imprisoned, and he thought it'd be a great idea to get all of his bed sheets and all of his clothes and tie them together, make this rope so he could climb down the tower. So he gets started. He ties it off. He's got it all firm and just levered in there, puts that out, starts climbing down, and he gets, probably about 20 to 30 feet down. And then his weight kicked in and gravity kicked in. And gravity is a cruel fucking mistress because this rope broke and he fell to his death.
Really? You can't dangle from a t-shirt. Huh.
I guess not.
Do not try this at home, children. It's not going to work.
No.
That's what it's always cracked me up about this whole story about. It's like they rip the sheets into little things and then they create a rope out of it. And one of the ones that I come up with right off is in the I think it's Desolation of Smaug, the Hobbit movie. He rips his sheets up and then he braids them into this rope. Now, I don't know if you've ever braided anything in your life or done like the hand crocheting thing. A 4-foot section of rope becomes 8 inches.
Right.
So if you're going to braid something like this, 5 or 6 sheets are going to be about 4 feet long. So You're not going to make it to the bottom of the Tower of London. You're barely going to have enough to tie it to some bars.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say he didn't braid it. He just tied them together.
Yeah.
But, if anybody has seen rope is braided. That's what gives it its strength. So That was my first one.
The rope broke, and as a consequence, he fell to his death.
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't know for a fact that this is the first person to ever try this way, but if you've ever seen pictures of the Tower of London, it's not a short building. We're talking like 11 stories for being a solid block building. It's huge. So I don't know where in the tower he was at, but still, if he's in the tower, then he obviously committed a serious act towards the crown. So this guy isn't either he's a political prisoner or he's a bad dude.
Right.
You know, I'm sure I could go down the rabbit hole and actually click on the link to tell me what he did, but I'm not going to because I don't give a shit about Gruff. Anything that you need to know about this is the dude fell and he died. So every time that somebody's done this in a movie afterwards, you go back and think about poor Gruff here, and he died too.
Oh, actually, because now you got me curious. He was one of the hostages taken by King John of England as a pledge for his father's continued good faith. That's as a boy. His father died in 1240, blah, blah, blah. Let's see, imprisonment. Here we go. He was held prisoner by his brother. Okay, now this is just fucked up. His name is Griffidid. His brother's name is Daffodid. So we got Daffy Duck and we got Gruff the Crime Dog. Wow. But he was imprisoned by his brother when the latter took over Gwynedd, following a successful invasion of the Welsh. Basically, he was a prisoner of war.
Yeah.
So that's what he was imprisoned for. So there you go. There's a little background on him. So from there, where are we going, Jason?
Let's jump up about a century.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. No, we're going to go farther than that. We're going to jump up about 400 years to the 17th century.
Okay.
Dutch in 1621. There was a Dutch author by the name of, and I'm going to slaughter his last name too, Hugo. I'm going to say Grotius. Escaped the Loevestein castle where he was held captive by hiding himself in a book chest, and then he was smuggled outside. Right
here. So we don't have to slaughter. He was also known as Hugo de Groot.
De Groot.
Yep.
I am de Groot.
He was also a Dutch jurist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But, so
already we're finding inventive ways of getting out of prison. We're smuggling. We're jumping in. He's essentially jumping in the laundry.
Yeah. Yep, and being smuggled outside.
Yes. Now this is something you have to have a co-conspirator, because if they're going to carry a book chest and it's 210 pounds heavier than it was the last time you carried it, you might want to look inside.
Right. But books are heavy.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, that's
the favorite part about moving.
Especially back then. Because they didn't have paperbacks.
No. These were, well, about this time, I guess they probably were into the, well after the printing press now, but these are still big leather-bound volumes.
Right. They're like, when we were kids, the whole encyclopedias.
Yes. So. For those that don't know that, that's Wikipedia in book form.
Right.
That if you edited it, it took a lot of white out and a really pissed off librarian.
Yes. So from there, we're going to jump up another 100 years. And we'll go to this Englishman, Jack Sheppard. I mean, this guy was a thief. He was a burglar. He was notorious and a gaol breaker, which I don't know what the hell that is. But he was born into a poor family. He was apprenticed by a carpenter. So he had to go and start stealing shit. So he was arrested and imprisoned 5 times.
What?
In 1724, but escaped 4 times. So this guy escaped 4 different times from prison. And so he was this notorious public figure, and the poor people loved him.
Wow.
He was like the Robin Hood, I guess, except he didn't give shit to people.
Like Houdini before Houdini.
Right. And unfortunately, like a lot of this research, especially from way back then, it's really hard to find more information on them, because like when you get up into like the more current stuff, then you find out whether or not these people were, recaptured and stuff like that.
Right.
So
And like we say on the show a lot, history was written by the victor, so we don't know. There's a lot of parts that are sensationalized in a lot of these accounts.
right. So, but and a lot of this were taken from Wikipedia.
Right.
So I'm just gonna skip the other one because there's just not enough information on it.
But author and adventurer Giacomo Casanova.
Yeah.
Escaped from prison in 1757.
Right. It doesn't really give us information.
I tried to look it up too, and it's like, what?
Right. He did have an autobiography.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if I'm going to write my own, I'm going to write a book about me, or if I'm going to write a book, it's going to be about me, because what do I know more than about, it's all the subject materials right here.
Right. And they say, write what you know. So
yeah,
here you go.
And I know myself, and I know how to waste time and.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump up to the 19th century, and I want to jump into this one right here because I found this one really interesting. And this happened on November 27th, 1863. Now, there's John Hunt Morgan, and he was a Confederate general in the American Civil War. And he also had a cohort, Thomas Hine, he was a Confederate cavalryman, and he was a spy for the Confederacy. Now, they had those two, John and 6 of his officers, one of them being Thomas Hine, they escaped from their cells in the Ohio Penitentiary by digging a tunnel from Hine's cell into the inner yard, and then ascending a wall with a rope made from bunk coverlets and a bent poker iron. And I bet you they braided them because it didn't break.
Nice.
But yeah, I found that one really interesting because it kind of tied into the Civil War, which we talked about a little bit in our last podcast.
But okay, so I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole because this one is eerily similar to a prison escape that happened just a couple years ago in Mexico, and Juan El Chapo Guzman,
Chapo,
notorious drug dealer, maybe the most powerful drug kingpin in the world at the time, probably still is today, even though he's been extradited to the United States. He was found and imprisoned in this Mexican high security prison. They pretty much built the place for him. Okay?
Yes.
And what they ended up doing was they put him in this cell. They put a camera in there so they could monitor him 24 hours a day. Well, the one thing that they didn't do was monitor all the area around the prison.
Right.
After the prison was built, this farmhouse was built about 1.5 miles away. That was never it wasn't there before. This home was built with a big pole barn next to it.
Yep.
And then a year later, Juan Guzman, or we'll just call him El Chapo, who walks behind the shower there, ducks down, and doesn't come back. What they did was they dug this 1.5 mile tunnel from this farmhouse that they built all the way underneath the prison, and then put in a ladder with this elaborate ventilation and electrical system with a motorcycle down there, where he rode the motorcycle 1.5 miles back to this home, jumps in a car, drives away. Took him a couple of years to find him after this.
Actually, he was recaptured 6 months later.
Okay.
Now, I researched this one a lot because this was also in the White Rabbit episode. But interesting things about this. Okay, for one, you always hear about people tunneling out of a prison. You never hear about them tunneling in.
Right.
And another interesting thing is they knew exactly where to tunnel up where the blind spot was in the cameras.
Exactly.
Because he had a blind spot in his shower. He had a shower in his cell. So he tunneled up there. But what they did was, and here's where modern technology really comes in, they used satellite images to find out exactly where his cell was and to help guide them while they're tunneling.
Yeah.
And So it was on July 11th, 2015, when they broke through and got him out. And the ironic stuff here, this is where it gets really interesting. This is where there had to have been an inside man, because the high security prisoners in that prison all had tracking bracelets on, so they knew where they were at all times.
But he didn't.
No, he did, but it was turned off.
Oh, okay.
And they also had anti-tunneling software that was also turned off. So there was an inside man somewhere in there. So I just thought that was really, really interesting, because like White Rabbit really went into detail on this one.
That's crazy. I do know after he was captured, after this, they rotated his cell on a random schedule so that if they were to try to tunnel again, they would basically have to put a tunnel under the entire prison.
Right.
Because he wasn't in the same cell twice, and they kept moving him on average of every 3 to 4 days.
Right.
With cameras installed in the new cells.
That would be a pain in the ass.
Yeah. And then they extradited him to the United States, and now he's in Colorado, where the Unabomber and the Shoe Bomber and Whitey Bulger and Barron, the Aryan Nation leader who just passed away, was at.
That is interesting.
That is a fucked up prison. So there's only been ever 2 supermax prisons built in the country. Obviously, the first one was Alcatraz, which was supposedly escape proof because of where its location was in San Francisco Bay, in the frigid water and the shark infested waters.
Right.
Everything. But the other one is in Colorado. I can't remember exactly where, but I don't think we're supposed to know where it is either.
Right.
But it's kind of cool how they developed this, because none of the windows are on a regular schedule where you would normally think windows would be, and it's a complete and total labyrinth, to where it confuses your brain that when you walk in there that you can't figure out where north is, and it's nestled in this valley around mountains where the peaks all look the same.
Right.
On the thing. So if you are looking at these windows and they're not spaced evenly to where you can kind of gauge, you can't see the same terrain from a single walk. So you can't figure out the layout around the building at all. So it's just all designed to fuck you up in your head. So you can't figure out where north is. So you can't figure out how to, even if you were to escape, you wouldn't know where the fuck to go.
Right.
And then, but it houses, it's supposed to house like 1,200 people, but it's only got like less than 300 in it. And it's like the worst of the worst.
Yeah. That's unfortunate for the people there.
Oh, yeah. But when you think about the people that are there, you've got people like Ted Kaczynski. You've got people like Whitey Bulger, who was, everybody's seen Black Mass, the Johnny Depp character, was a real man. He was finally captured
right
years ago. Richard Reed, the Shoe Bomber, those are the type of people that are in this building.
Right. I just turned my fan on. Can you hear that? Is it muffling anything?
No, I can't hear it.
Okay, good. Sorry about that, folks. While we're on a rabbit hole, I want to go down another rabbit hole.
Perfect.
Now, we've all heard stories about people in prison and, having their loved ones sending them files in a cake. So I was interested to find out where these stories came from, because, you hear those stories and you're like, come on, seriously, do people actually do that? Or, blah, blah, blah. So I did some research on it. So it actually did happen several times. In 1804, William Blewett, who was a gang member, and he was excellent pickpocket and housebreaker, he was sentenced to 7 years, and he was placed aboard a prison ship. He found out several inmates got files and saws and gingerbread cakes, and then he turned on them and actually was pardoned for it. So I found that interesting. Another example of it was January 14th, 1909. This dude, F.J. Humley, he was jailed for passing a forged check. While he was waiting for trial, he was sent 2 cakes, one with chocolate icing and one with white icing. The sheriff Hamill, he intercepted the cakes, and when he did that, he was feeling them. He's like, these just feel really heavy. So he decided to figure out why these cakes were so heavy. So he cuts them open and finds in each cake half of a 38. So somebody was smuggling in, half or 2 halves of a gun to him. And it was done by his friend Ari Watson. And when they escaped, they had plans to sail to Mexico and sell opium. He was then sentenced to 7 years.
Nice.
Yep. Okay, let me see if this is another one. Oh, yeah, this one. In 1916, Eamon de Valera was imprisoned for his leading role in the Easter Rising. Now, the Easter Rising was Irish militants revolting against the British government, but they failed to get their independence. So while he's in prison, he borrowed the chaplain master's key, then melted stumps of leftover church candles to make a wax impression. He then sent a copy to his friends outside. They fashioned a metal key and sent it back to him inside a cake. So he gets the key out, but it doesn't work. So they send him another one inside another cake. So then he gets that one and it works, and then he unlocks all the gates and walks out past the guards and everything and escapes scot-free. And you want to know what's really ironic about this entire story?
What's that?
Between the years of 1959 and 1973, he became the 3rd president of Ireland.
Oh, wow.
So that's I found that interesting. But that's a little background on files inside a cake and where that came from.
So going down that brought me up to when I was doing this, I found a website that had some of the strangest things ever smuggled into prison.
Okay.
But one of those was hilarious because in a correctional facility in Chetumal, Mexico. I slaughtered that because I don't speak. I can't. I have a hell of a time with their names. Somewhere in Mexico, a woman went to visit her husband in jail with a suitcase. She had a rolling suitcase.
Oh, I know this one.
And when she was rolling it in, it kept bouncing and everything, and they noticed it was awfully really light. So they didn't even bother searching it because there couldn't have been that much in it.
Right.
And if you know anything about Mexican prisons, there's some that, and I don't know if this is one of them, but there are some of their prisons where if your family doesn't bring you food in prison, you don't eat.
Right.
You don't offer that stuff. You are in there and you're supposed to be taken care of. Like it's a retirement home, but you have to bring all the medicine and food and blankets and clothing and everything for them. It's like a summer camp for a 6-year-old.
Right.
But so when she was leaving, this obviously light suitcase was really heavy.
Yep.
So they stopped her and they're like, we need to look in that. And when they open it up, he's inside the suitcase, and they tried to roll her out. So what they ended up doing was they put her in with him.
Right. Yep, I remember that one. I thought that one was really humorous. Which that one leads me to another one that is really funny. This one happened in Brazil. There was this guy named Ronaldo in 2012. He was waiting trial for drug trafficking. And while he's in prison, waiting for his trial, his wife comes to visit him for a conjugal visit. And, so she gets there, and he has her take her clothes off, but instead of actually having sex for the conjugal visit, he puts her clothes on and walks out of the prison. He grabs her ID, and as he walks past the guards, he flashes her ID. They think nothing of it. He walks out of the prison. He gets he got 15 minutes away before he was caught by the guards and brought back.
Oh wow!
But I saw the pictures of it, and he did not look anything like his wife. So these guards must have been blind or just stupid.
They just didn't give a fuck.
Right.
And one of the other ones also came that I found was really cool, also came from Brazil, was a guy had actually trained carrier pigeons to fly in and take messages in and out of prison. Well, one time the prison guard happened to notice that this pigeon was carrying something big on its back, so he went to investigate, and the guy was smuggling cell phones into the prison using pigeons.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, if you want Orange is the New Black, that's a hot commodity in prisons.
Yes. Yes, it is. Especially when you sit in a toilet stall and cry for hours.
Right. All right. Let's get back on track.
Okay.
So now we're to the 19th century-ish.
Yeah.
And here we have the Libby prison escape. Dun, dun, dun. And what is significant about this? What's significant about this is it was in Richmond, Virginia in February 1864, saw over 100 Union prisoners of war escape from captivity. It was one of the most successful prison breaks of the American Civil War. Actually, it was over 109 Union PNWs broke out of a building on the night between February 9th and February 10th. All but 50 were drowned in nearby James River.
Oh.
All but 52 were drowned in the nearby James River, successfully reached back to Union lines. So you got 109 people that escaped. 2 of them drowned, so that leaves you 107, and only 50 of them successfully made it to Union lines.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes you wonder, if I'm going to escape from prison, I'm going to run as fast and as far as I can fucking get.
I'm going to stay in the front of the pack. No matter how fast or how many times I had puke running, I don't have to be the fastest. I just have to be faster than you.
Exactly.
Because at that point, it's almost a 50-50 split.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Or close to 1 out of every 2 made it.
Yeah, I mean, and compared to some of the or most of the other ones that I've researched, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
All right. So, and this is, one really cool. So, in 1881, the outlaw, Billy the Kid, he managed to escape from prison. But in a few short months later, he was captured and shot by Pat Garrett.
So they say.
Yes. I think he might be hanging out with John Lennon and Elvis.
Yeah. No, there's the whole William H. Bonney net. There's everybody who's seen the Young Guns movies know the kind of the story that they kind of throw out there, that he doesn't get killed by his friend, and he goes on to live a peaceful life as a sheep herder or whatever the fuck he was. And then in the 50s, I think it was the 50s, he came out of hiding and he was trying to tell people that he was in fact Billy the Kid, but nobody wanted to believe him because everybody believed the sensationalized story of how Pat Garrett killed him. Yada yada.
Right.
But
right.
The conspiracy theory goes back to saying that it was something that they concocted between Pat Garrett and William H. Bonney, that Billy the Kid would escape, but Pat Garrett would get chance to claim that it was his body, that the person that he shoots was in fact Billy the Kid. And even if he did, he was a chicken shit and shot him in the back.
Exactly. Well, he was eating, wasn't he?
What's that?
Wasn't Billy the Kid eating at the time?
He was eating or changing a picture or something like that. I might be getting some of these gunshot people confused, because I think Jesse James was shot in the back too. But,
I think
so. But this escape, the Billy the Kid one, it gets really sensationalized in the Young Guns thing about how he's got really big wrists but small hands.
Right.
Where he was able to get out of shackles, but he did somehow manage to get out of his hand restraints, wrestle a guy, get his shotgun or his rifle from him, shoot him in the stairs, and then shoot his way out of prison, only to be captured or shot a little bit later.
Right. And I'm kind of with you, because all the stories you hear about Billy the Kid, he came across as an intelligent person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he would be kind of intuitive too, where he would, Pat Garrett was supposedly his friend, but I think he would start seeing, because when you're turning on your friend, you start showing signs of it.
Right.
And somebody who is an outlaw and as intelligent as him are going to pick up on those signs and start getting a little paranoid.
Exactly. You pick up on cues that your friend's acting a little weird.
Yep. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it was somebody else that Pat Garrett brought. But then again, this is my opinion.
Well, and the other thing too is back then they used to do if you were like the James gang, when they were killed, they were put on display for everybody to see. They didn't do this with Billy the Kid.
Right.
They threw him in a box and buried him. So that was part of that's part of the whole thing, and why some people, it gives credence to the whole conspiracy, because most conspiracies are actually grounded somewhere. They're built out of some part of truth to a story, and this is the part that really gets out. If somebody as notorious as Billy the Kid was shot, everybody would want to see the body.
Oh yeah. It would, because it's that sensation.
What you did back then. If your child died, you would still take a family portrait with, like, they would do that with not even your child. They'd do that with grandma. They would do that with anybody that died. They would still do death photos.
Yeah, it's creepy as fuck.
Thing. But they also used to do death masks.
Yep.
Where they would take plaster and put it over the person's face, and then they'd capture what they look like. And if you've ever taken CPR, you've kissed face with a death mask, because there's a Jane Doe that from England, I believe it was England. They did a death mask of her, but somehow her death mask, and they don't know who she was, but somehow her death mask became the face of the CPR doll.
Oh, nice! I did not know.
So everybody that does mouth to mouth to a CPR doll is kissing the death mask of this woman.
Hold on. Wait a minute. Did we just cross over from comedy to educational?
Getting knowledge.
Spending some knowledge on y'all. So where do we want to go from Billy the Kid?
Okay. So there was, at this era, like right around the Civil War, Wild West was crazy for stagecoach robbing, jailbreaks. I mean, there's a whole podcast in going over all the crazy fucking shit that went on in the Wild West.
Right.
And we're talking about a lot of the shit that you'd never hear in the movies. But almost as crazy as that is what happens in the early 20th century, which we're about to get into. And this is where prison breaks, and this is where the outlaws go from being jackasses that ride horses that are a nuisance when they come to town, but get sensationalized in the nickel books,
right,
or the dime novels, wherever you want to call them, to assholes that rob banks and now are getting sensationalized in the newspaper.
Right. Yeah, and not only that, but I want to jump on the first one because this one kind of fascinated me, and I did extra research on it. But this is about Frederick Moores, and this is in 1916. So Frederick Moores was an Austrian-born American serial killer. He was declared insane and placed into the Mattawan Institute for the Insane in the United States in 1915. He escaped in 1916 and was never seen again. Now, I found this one interesting, so I wanted to know more. So, he was born Karl Menarek Moores. He immigrated to New York City from his native Austria-Hungary in June of 1914. Okay. He went through the Immigrant Free Employment Bureau. He was German-speaking, and he gained employment as a porter for the German Oddfellows home in Unionport. Now, the home housed 250 orphans and 100 elderly men and women. And soon after he began working there, Moores exhibited signs of megalomania, which, if we look into our government, that is displayed predominantly there.
Oh.
But he would walk around the place wearing a white lab coat with a stethoscope around his neck, and he insisted that the elderly residents, whom he terrified on a regular basis, they would have to address him as Herr Doctor. Though he terrified the elder residents, both the younger residents and visitors seemed to like him and enjoy his company. So he's there for 4 months, and during this period, 17 residents, which is an unusually high number even today, died at the home.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah. So what he did is he had used arsenic at first to start killing the elderly, and he ran into problems with that. So he'd go to chloroform, and so he'd hold chloroform over them, knock them out, and then stuff their orifices with cotton, basically suffocate them to death.
Oh.
I mean, it's pretty gruesome. So the administration called the police to investigate. Now, early in the investigation, the police learned of the fear the elderly patients had of him. And he soon became the primary suspect of the investigation. When they questioned him, he readily and calmly admitted to killing 8 of the 17 patients that had recently died. He claimed that these were mercy killings and that they had been nuisances. He went on to describe his methods.
They were nuisances.
Yeah. So he goes on and says, first I would pour a drop or two of chloroform on a piece of absorbent cotton and hold it to the nostrils of the old person. Soon my man would swoon. Then I would close the orifices of the body with cotton, stuffing in ears, nostrils, and so on. Next, I'd pour a little chloroform down the throat and prevent the fumes escaping the same way. So he would poison them with the chloroform and then put cotton balls in there so that way the fumes didn't go out, so the fumes would end up killing them. He also went on to claim that the home superintendent had encouraged him to kill the more ill and more elderly patients. The district attorney declined to prosecute Morris, finding him to be criminally insane, and committed him to the Hudson River State Hospital pending deportation to Austria. But he escaped from the institution in May 1916. His fate is unknown, although it's most likely he is declared deceased. Yeah, considering it was 1916, I'm going to go on a limb and say this motherfucker's dead.
More than likely, yeah. Otherwise, if he's not, then he's definitely not a threat.
Right, but I just found that fascinating. I don't know why, but serial killers is something that I'm interested in. It's a more fascination. I get that, but it kind of makes you wonder what makes these people tick.
The psychology and the psychopathy behind what makes serial killers do what they do is always, it's, you and I grew up watching horror films and listening to stories about these things. We grew up watching Bundy and Gacy and Ramirez, and we watched these things unfold on television. I guess what they call the golden age of serial killers, which was the late 50s to the early 80s. We were at the end of that as children, but I remember these, all these newscasts about these. I remember watching Richard Ramirez having the pentagram on his hand.
Yeah.
On watching that on the nightly news, and I'm like, damn, that dude's metal, man.
Right. But something else I want to touch on here is we're talking about all this really wicked, insane shit, but it furthers a point that I've made several times. I don't know if I did it on the podcast, but I've made it before to friends and family. Because everybody says, how violent everything is today. It's no more violent than it was then. The difference between then and now is if somebody robs a bank in California and here in Michigan, now I'm going to know about it within 5 minutes because it's going to be posted on the news, all over social media, everything else.
We have a 24-hour news cycle, an instant news cycle. Yes, you hear about it more. And I'm with you. I get annoyed and pretty much pissed off when I hear about, the world today, it's not any worse than it's ever been.
Right. It's just sensationalism by the media.
Exactly. It's propagandized by the news and how we get people to say shit.
Right. So. And it's to keep people in fear.
Yeah.
I have a friend that went to a local diner here, with his basically niece, who was like 2 or 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sitting there, and a guy walks into the diner, sits down with a gun openly displayed on his hip. Now, if you feel the need to go to dinner with a gun because you want it displayed out in the open, the only reason you're doing that is to intimidate people.
Or you have a really small dick.
Right. Because you're hoping something will break out so you can brandish your gun and go, woo, I'm a cowboy. I'm going to save everybody.
I'm willing to bet that 9 out of 10 people that have a concealed weapon are the first ones to shit their pants if something was to go down.
Right.
I don't want my life in the hands of that dipshit that's sitting at the counter at a diner to save me.
Right.
I'll take my odds. Chances are you just brought another weapon for the perpetrator to use because they're going to get it from you.
Right. Not only that, but you do start shooting. And you've never been in this situation before, because I don't give a shit what you said. You're not a cop. You've probably never been in this situation before. Maybe if you were in the military, but so you haven't been trained in combat. So how likely is your nerves to kick in and you end up shooting an innocent bystander instead of the person you're trying to shoot?
Exactly.
And not only that, but when the police show up, they see you with a gun, they're going to shoot you.
Exactly. They don't know who's the good guy, who's the bad guy.
So, yeah, it's just ignorant. Anywho, back on topic. I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay, so I want to stay at the same time period as Frederick Moore right now, because that was 1915, 1916, 17 range. There's another prison escape that happens in Salem, Oregon, that on September 18th of 1917. Carl Panzram escapes from the Oregon State Penitentiary in Salem. There, he escaped by sawing through the bars of his cell, and then caught a freight train heading east. That he adopted the name John O'Leary and shaved off his mustache. Which, if you don't know who Carl Panzram is, I implore you to go look up Carl Panzram, because this guy's one of the most psychotic yet most I wouldn't say inspiring is not the word, but this man is every level of depravity, and he's probably they called him the meanest prisoner ever, because this dude is just he was in and out of prison his entire life.
Okay.
And when he was 11 years old, his mom kicks him out of his house, and then he runs away and he jumps trains, and then he ended up getting gang raped by a bunch of hobos. And then he was already a bad kid anyway, but then he just snaps after this. So then he's just running around the country raping and sodomizing people at will, and then later in life he starts killing them. But one of the craziest things about Carl Panzram happens after he escapes from the Oregon State Penitentiary is he goes to New Haven, Connecticut, and he burglars a home. And he steals a bunch of stuff, including a gun that he uses to kill how many more people? He kills a bunch of people with this gun, 8 or 10 people with this gun, because after this he also steals a yacht, and then he starts traveling around picking up people to ride on his yacht, and then you take them out and rob them and shoot them and throw them in the ocean, but all with the same gun. So after this kept going and going, and he did all this. Well, he ends up losing the gun, and it comes to light that the house in New Haven, Connecticut that he had robbed was former President Howard Taft.
Oh, wow.
So he robs Howard Taft, former President Howard Taft, steals his gun, and then uses that in a bunch of crimes and murders afterwards. And that is just the tip of the iceberg of Carl Panzram, because there's several podcasts out there that are very good, and one of them, last podcast on the left, does actually 4 hour and 15-minute episodes on just him.
Wow.
It's phenomenal. Go and listen to their Panzram. There's a couple others out there that do a really good job of Panzram, but they go really in depth on the history of this man.
That's awesome.
I'll give you one more thing about what Panzram is. When he was finally hung in Leavenworth prison, where he originally starts prison in Leavenworth, and then he ends up in Leavenworth, where he's finally executed. And he's hung, and then he says, "Yes, hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard! I could have killed a dozen men while you're screwing around." Those were his last words.
So he went out the way he lived.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like the man was like human crank. I mean, they couldn't break him they couldn't break his spirit no matter what they did to him. He's probably the most true human to ever walk the planet, even though his true nature was just evil.
All right. Let's touch on one of these most famous people before we take a break, and we'll end this week's and we'll continue into next week's. But I want to talk about one of the most famous prison escapers, one of the most famous people who did prison escapes, and that being John Dillinger.
John Dillinger.
Yep, and most people know John Dillinger because he was notorious for robbing banks and things like that, and they named a gun after him.
Yeah, so, there's a band that's named after him, Dillinger Escape Plan.
Yep. So in 1933, he is in Indiana State Penitentiary. And, he was paroled in 1933. Within 4 months, he was back in jail in Lima, Ohio. But his gang sprang him, killing the jailer, Sheriff Jesse Sarber. Most of the gang was captured again by the end of the year in Tucson, Arizona, due to fire at the historic Hotel Congress. Dillinger alone was sent to Lake County Jail in Crown Point, Indiana. He was to face trial for the suspect killing of police officer William O'Malley during a bank shootout in East Chicago, Indiana. Sometime after his escape from jail during this time on trial, a famous photograph was taken of Dillinger putting his arm on prosecutor Robert Estill's shoulder when suggested to him by reporters. Blah, 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 I can't read today. So then, on March 3rd, 1934, Dillinger escaped from the escape proof, as it was dubbed by local authorities at the time, Crown Point, Indiana County Jail, which was guarded by many police officers and National Guardsmen because of his escape attempts in the past.